Welcome. You're still watching Politbureau. Two presidents on the African continent have been forced out of office in 1 month. And the month of April is not even over yet. After 20 years in power, Algeria's Abdelaziz Bouteflika was pushed following weeks of mass demonstrations. Then came the uprisings against Sudan's Omar al-Bashir, who had been in office for 30 years since the 1989 military coup. To help us make sense of what's happening on the continent is the ANC Subcommittee Chairperson on International Relations, Lindiwe Zulu. Thank you so much, Minister, for making time for us. How would you sum all of this up?
Well, we live in a very unpredictable world, but we can make it predictable, in my view, because there's a huge push, especially by young people, to say that they want to see change. There's a push where people are saying that they no longer want leaders that stay in power for a very long time. But also, it's not just about leaders staying in power for a very long time. It's what the leaders do when they're in power for that very long time. There's a lot of conscientization now, and young people in particular are saying we need change. But it's not just young people. It's just ordinary people really saying they want to see a change in their lives. They want to see development happening. They want to see leaders being accountable once they have been elected into office.
The argument from some people is that we can't turn a blind eye to the possibility of even foreign interference.
Oh, of course no, you cannot, because, you know, when we talk about the dynamic and unpredictable world, but also talk about the fact that in the African continent, there's still a scramble for Africa's resources. Africa is said to be the next best thing, and the issue is we have to answer the question, is the next best thing for who? So we can't turn a blind eye on that one, because those that are mightier than many of the African countries, they still think that they have the right to interfere in the politics of the African continent.
Then why has it been so difficult for some of these? We're not saying at all that there is foreign interference in the current unrest that we are seeing, but this has always been something that's there, that there's a possibility of foreign interference. Why hasn't the different statesmen as well as the different countries been able to push back and guard their countries against that foreign interference and undue pressure that may come on the government of the day?
It's easier said than done, because, look, it's about the economy of the world. It's always about the economics. It's always about where the resources are. It's always about how can we get those resources. It's always about other nations also trying to make their nations look better from a developmental point of view. And we must not forget the history, because, you know, sometimes people want to say, no, don't tell us about that history. The bottom line is that dealing with colonialism and transforming the African continent and transforming developing countries in a world where there are other powers that seem to have powers and greater influence is not as easy as possible. But the bottom line is that the new environment, even in the African continent itself, we need to be conscious ourselves on the needs of the people and the demands of the people. We need to make sure that we build strong institutions which people can have confidence in. Here we are in South Africa. We're just about to go to elections a few days from now. When people have the confidence that when they go and cast their vote is going to be protected, you won't have much of an issue about them not trusting the system. So the entire continent has to really look into how do we make sure that there's institutional recourse for people, and people must have confidence and trust in the people that lead them. Even though they elect them, yes, they elect us, but they want to have the confidence that they elect us, and we are going to just respond to their needs.
Presidents for life, presidents who are not accountable to the citizenry or those who have put them into power. Is the African Union failing on this front? To say to even President Paul Biya, you've been in power since 1982.
Well, I think that if you look at the transformation of the AU to the AU itself from the OAU, and the decisions that were taken thereof in terms of leaders sometimes protecting each other and leaders sometimes helping each other to remain in power, I think those days are gone, and the AU itself is very conscious of that. That's why the AU has got Agenda 2063 part of which also speaks to peace, security, and stability, part of which speaks to strengthening our institutions of governance. Yeah. So I think that those days of the 60s and so forth are gone, and all of us as leaders, including ourselves here in South Africa, were very conscious of the fact that we need to do everything we can to strengthen our institutions so that people can have confidence in us. We need to do the right thing by the people.
Minister, considering that that you have these two presidents, Algeria's president as well as Sudan, who have stepped down, do we define this as a military coup or undue interference by the military?
Well, the history of the military in most of the African countries, you can't overturn it just easy like that, because they've had a hold for a very long time. That's why, from a South African perspective, we've always believed that the military must play the role of the military by defending the country, defending the nation, and not be at the center.
But are these military coups, do you think?
It's hard to tell, understand, because when you think of who has been in power that long, you wouldn't expect the people that have been in power that long to see President al-Bashir moving and to see Algeria moving, and you think that the army is not going to play a role there, because they've been part and parcel of government greater than you would find in South Africa, where the army knows exactly where it belongs and it supports the government in the way that it's supposed. So it's about constitutions, it's about support respect for human rights. It's about building institutions that will help to make sure that the military remains where the military is supposed to be. But I think if you look at it, how far we've gone in terms of the role of the military in the African continent, it's been reduced very much so. But again, in both countries, you must take a step back and look at the role of the armies in those countries in the past 20 years.
Sudan, does this now mean that should Omar al-Bashir step in SA, that he will be arrested?
I don't think he's going to step in SA at this particular moment. Remember that when he stepped in SA, he was a president, and a president who was recognized globally.
But if he does, will he be arrested?
Well, I don't know. Arrested by South Africa?
By South Africa.
No, I don't want to get into a discussion that's not there yet, because
but the thing is that the warrant of arrest is still there. So I'm asking that if he does step into South Africa, will South Africa affect that arrest? Because he's not president anymore.
Well, he's not president anymore, and when he steps to South Africa, the law will take its course as far as South Africa is concerned.
He will be arrested?
I can't say that he'll be
But what
arrested.
do you mean that the law will take its course?
Well, I just mean that if he happens to come to South Africa, the law will take its course, but there'll be a whole lot of other considerations that need to be taken into consideration. He's a former head of state. So it's not as easy as you like. It's a Lindiwe Zulu arriving in a country and he's not covered by a certain thing. He's a former head of state, and that also needs to be taken into consideration.
Okay, then. Thank you so much, Minister Lindiwe Zulu, the subcommittee chairperson of the ANC on International Relations. After the break, to tweet or not to tweet, the story of Finance Minister Tito Mboweni.